They say loyalty runs deeper than blood in the bikie world. That once you swear allegiance, there is no leaving, only death, prison, or silence. But what happens when loyalty is tested by greed, murder, and the ruthless pursuit of power? In May 2024, the Australian underworld was rocked by an event so unprecedented it shattered decades of criminal tradition. 36 fully patched members of Australia's largest outlaw motorcycle gang, the Rebels Motorcycle Club, walked away not one by one. Not quietly, but together. They abandoned their patches. They kept their Harley-Davidsons. And with that single act of defiance, they declared war, not against a rival gang, but against their own leadership. This wasn't just a resignation. It was an internal collapse. A betrayal from within. Tonight on Crime Cipher. Before we go any deeper into this story of loyalty, betrayal, and bloodshed, subscribe to Crime Cipher. Like this video. And ring the bell. We expose the hidden power struggles, assassinations, and financial secrets that tore apart Australia's most powerful bikie empire. A story that begins with a single sniper's bullet fired into the darkness of a Perth racetrack. Chapter 1. The Empire That Ruled. To understand how the rebels fell apart from the inside, we must go back to a time when they ruled the Australian underworld like kings. The Rebels Motorcycle Club was founded in Brisbane in 1969, originally calling themselves the Confederates. What began as a loose brotherhood of riders evolved into a criminal empire spanning continents. Street-level violence. It was in building networks, drug trafficking, money laundering, legitimate businesses that could wash dirty cash. The rebels didn't just control territory, they controlled markets. By the 2000s, police estimated the gang was involved in everything from methamphetamine trafficking to extortion. South Australian police reported that 80% of nightclubs and bars Adelaide used security companies owned by bikie gangs, with the rebels at the center of this web. But empires built on violence and, at their peak, the rebels controlled. Behind the leather vests and roaring engines was a tightly controlled hierarchy that functioned more like a corporation than a biker club. Orders flowed downward, silence flowed upward, and disobedience was handled internally. Law enforcement knew the rebels weren't just riders, they were power brokers, mediators, and enforcers in Australia's criminal economy. To cross them meant consequences, and for years, no one inside or outside the club dared challenge their authority. Over 70 chapters across Australia, more than 1,000 patched members, and held the title of the largest outlaw motorcycle gang in the country. Their patch said everything. A Confederate flag. A skull wearing a cap. The infamous 1% diamond, declaring them outlaws who lived outside society's rules. Their motto was simple, defiant, and absolute. Rebels forever. Forever rebels. For decades, that promise seemed unbreakable. Chapter 2. The Maltese Falcon. The architect of this empire was Alex Vella, known in the underworld as the Maltese Falcon. Born in Malta in 1953, Vella migrated to Australia as a teenager. He wasn't just muscle, he was strategic, disciplined, and ambitious. Alex Vella ruled with calculated distance. Unlike other bikie bosses who thrived on intimidation and visibility, Vella preferred control from the shadows. He built alliances, avoided unnecessary wars, and ensured the rebels expanded quietly while rivals self-destructed through violence. To many members, he wasn't just a leader, he was untouchable. And when he was suddenly removed from the board, it sent a shockwave through every chapter in the country. A former boxer, a businessman, and eventually, national president of the rebels, Vella understood something other bikie leaders didn't. The real money wasn't in street violence. It was in networks. By the 2000s, police estimated the rebels were embedded in almost every major criminal market in Australia. In South Australia, police reported that up to 80% of nightclubs and bars used security companies owned or controlled by bikie gangs, with the rebels at the center. But empires built on violence and greed always carried the seeds of their own destruction. In 2014, Alex Vella's reign came to an abrupt end when Australian immigration authorities cancelled his visa while he was visiting Malta. The Maltese Falcon was grounded, permanently exiled from the empire he built. And that left one question hanging over the underworld. Who would inherit the throne? Chapter 3. Two Centers of Power. Damien Vella inherited the title, but not the loyalty. Many older members saw him as a symbolic figurehead rather than a true successor. Meanwhile, Western Australia operated almost independently, generating massive income and enforcing its own rules. The rebels were now a divided kingdom, one crown in the east, one throne in the west. And history shows that empires rarely survive such fractures. Leadership passed to Damien Vella, Alex's nephew at just 43 years old. Damien suddenly controlled the largest bikie organization in Australia. But there was a problem. The rebels' true power wasn't in Sydney. It was 3,200 kilometers away, in Western Australia. And the man who ruled there was Nick Martin. Chapter 4, The King of the West. Nick Martin's authority wasn't granted, it was taken. He crushed rivals, survived betrayals, and built fear into a currency that kept WA chapters obedient. But power without accountability breeds paranoia. Those closest to him noticed his increasing isolation, his obsession with control, and his unwillingness to explain finances. The very traits that made him untouchable also made him vulnerable. He was a legend, charismatic, ruthless, feared and respected in equal measure. Martin had survived assassination attempts, gang wars, and internal power struggles. He ruled Western Australia like a medieval warlord. Members paid their dues directly to him, in cash. He lived in a mansion, drove luxury cars, and spent club money freely. Whispers began circulating about missing funds and expensive renovations. But no one dared question him openly. No one, except the man closest to him. Chapter 5. The Right Hand. For over a decade, Carl Labroy served as Nick Martin's sergeant-at-arms. Carl Labroy was the gatekeeper. If you wanted access to Martin, you went through him. If Martin needed enforcement, Labroy delivered. But years of loyalty came with a cost. He saw too much. He knew where the money went, who was being favored, and who was being cut out. In the bikie world, knowledge isn't power. It's a death sentence waiting to happen. Feared criminal organizations. But ruling an empire from Sydney while trying to control chapters across a continent the size of the United States would prove more challenging than anyone imagined. The real power center of the rebels wasn't in Sydney. It was 3,200 kilometers away, in Western Australia, where a man named Nick Martin had built his own kingdom. Nick Martin wasn't just the WA president of the rebels. He was a legend in the Australian underworld. Tough, charismatic, and absolutely ruthless. Labroy wasn't just an enforcer. He was Martin's. He had been a rebel for 25 years. Absolute loyalty was his currency. But in the bikie world, trust is dangerous. Chapter 6. The Sniper in the Dark. On December 12, 2020, Nick Martin attended drag races at the Perth Motorplex with his wife Amanda, his right-hand man in the Western Territories. Labroy had joined the rebels 25 years earlier and worked his way up through absolute loyalty and dedication. He was Martin's enforcer, his financial manager, and arguably the most trusted man in the WA chapters. But trust in the bikie world is a dangerous commodity. Everything changed on the night of December 12, 2020 at the Perth Motorplex in Kwinana. It was a family event. Thousands of spectators. Children everywhere. At 8:33 p.m., a single rifle shot shattered the night. The bullet struck Martin in the chest. As his wife tried to save him, he spoke his final words. "Babe, I've been shot." Nick Martin died in her arms. The Commandos' sudden expansion into Western Australia represented more than just a membership game. It was a strategic foothold in one of Australia's most lucrative criminal markets. WA's mining boom, isolated geography, and major ports made it ideal for drug trafficking, money laundering, and other organized crime activities. But perhaps the most significant impact was psychological. For decades, the bikie world had operated on principles of absolute loyalty and severe consequences. The King of Western Australia was executed in the most public bikie assassination in Australian history. Chapter 7. A Professional Kill. Police launched Operation Rel, uncovering a chilling truth. The killer wasn't a gang foot soldier. The use of a trained military sniper shattered long-held assumptions about bikie violence. This wasn't revenge fueled by emotion. It was a business transaction. Someone had enough money, influence, and confidence to outsource murder to a professional. And that raised an even darker question. If this level of betrayal was possible, who inside the rebels could still be trusted? He was a former Australian Army sharpshooter, with combat experience in Iraq. A professional. The contract. $150,000. The man who allegedly ordered the hit, David James Pye, a former rebel turned Comanchero. The assassin studied Martin for weeks. He waited in camouflage for over 10 minutes before pulling the trigger. A 5-year-old child sat just behind Martin. The bullet narrowly missed them. Chapter 8. The Money Trail. With Martin dead, Carl Labroy inherited chaos. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash-only club funds. Hidden across Perth, Martin had ruled like a dictator. No transparency, no records. When Martin died, he left behind a financial nightmare. Cash stashed in walls, safes, vehicles, and associates' homes, all undocumented. What was once seen as power now looked like recklessness. Labroy inherited not just leadership pressure, but suspicion from every direction. In trying to bring order, he unknowingly placed a target on his own back. Labroy tried to clean it up. That decision would destroy everything. In December 2022, police stopped Labroy's BMW. Inside, $27,850, wrapped in Christmas paper. Raids followed. $455,550 seized. Facing legal troubles, Damon Vila's position as national president became increasingly precarious. The man who had inherited the throne from his uncle Alex now presided over a fractured empire where loyalty could no longer be taken for granted. The Comancheros, meanwhile, leveraged their WA expansion to strengthen their position as Australia's premier outlaw motorcycle gang. Their successful recruitment of experienced former rebels gave them instant credibility and operational capability in a new territory. Labroy said it was rebel money for legal challenges. Sydney leadership wasn't convinced. Chapter 9. Distrust from the East. Damien Vella's people demanded court transcripts. TOWA members. Sydney leadership felt distant and disconnected from the reality on the ground. Men were jailed, wives struggled, and children suffered, yet support never came. The brotherhood they believed in had become transactional. Loyalty was demanded, but never returned. The cracks were no longer whispers. They were open wounds. They wanted to know what Labroy was saying. To Labroy. This was betrayal. After 25 years of loyalty, Sydney treated him like a thief. At the same time, WA rebels were fighting a brutal war with the Mongols. Members went to prison. Their families were abandoned. No legal support. No financial help. The unwritten code was broken. Chapter 10. The Great Exodus. In May 2024, Carl Labroy made his move. The mass resignation wasn't just symbolic. It was strategic. By walking away together, the members protected one another from retaliation. It was a calculated act of survival, not cowardice. In Bikie culture, leaving is unforgivable. Leaving together is revolutionary. And it sent a clear message. The rebels no longer owned Western Australia. 36 rebels resigned together. They handed in their patches. They kept their Harleys. Western Australia, once a rebel stronghold, collapsed overnight. Chapter 11. The Final Betrayal. 1 month later, Labroy walked into court wearing Comanchero colors. Labroy's appearance in Comanchero colors wasn't just affection, it was humiliation. The rebels lost territory, members, and credibility in a single move. Rival gangs watched closely. Law enforcement took notes. The myth of eternal loyalty was dead. And once a myth dies, fear dies with it. The ultimate insult. The rebels were finished. The rebels didn't fall because of police. They fell because leadership forgot the code. Fear isn't loyalty. Control isn't brotherhood. And when that truth was exposed, the empire collapsed from within. This is Crime Cipher, where we decode the darkest power structures in the criminal world. If you want more deep dive true crime documentaries, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications, because the most dangerous wars are the ones no one sees coming.